This house doesn't belong to you anymore. Time to leave." My father stood blocking the entrance to the penthouse, wearing a brand new suit, clutching a stack of legal documents. Beside him, my mother smiled triumphantly, dangling the apartment keys from her fingers. Behind them, 3 police officers and 2 attorneys waited. I stood on the sidewalk across the street, my heart pounding like a jackhammer. My grandfather, Jeff Cooper, the 75-year-old man who'd just returned from a supposed 3-month vacation to Europe, was about to be evicted from the very home he'd spent half his life building. But instead of panic, Grandpa just smiled softly. And what he said next made my blood run cold. "I knew you'd do this. That's exactly why I never actually left the city." If you're watching this story, please hit like and let me know what you'd do in this situation. Because what happened next will blow your mind. I'm Emma Cooper, 28 years old, an elementary school teacher in Queens, New York. 3 months ago, if someone had told me that my parents, the people I thought I knew better than anyone, would conspire to defraud my grandfather, I would have laughed it off as absurd. But that was before everything fell apart. My grandfather, Jeff Cooper, is a self-made man in every sense of the word. He started from absolutely nothing, an Irish immigrant kid with 200s in his pocket. 50 years later, he owned a logistics company with tens of millions in revenue and an Upper Manhattan penthouse worth $8 million. The 32nd floor penthouse overlooked Central Park, featuring 3 bedrooms, a private study, and enough space to house his entire collection of antiques and rare books. My parents, Richard and Linda Cooper, were the opposite. Both worked ordinary office jobs. Dad was an accountant at a mid-sized firm, Mom an HR assistant. Combined income of about $120,000 a year, enough to maintain a middle-class life in New Jersey. A 2-story house with a 30-year mortgage, 2 Toyota sedans, and an annual summer vacation in Florida. I always thought we were happy. Not wealthy like Grandpa, but warm and content. My parents never asked him for money, and he respected that. The relationship between him and my dad wasn't close, but it wasn't terrible either. They'd meet for Thanksgiving and Christmas, exchange small talk about work, then go back to their separate lives. Until this February. Dad got laid off. The company went bankrupt, 150 employees let go at once, no severance package, no warning, just a cold email on a Friday afternoon. 2 months later, with only one income, they couldn't keep up with the $500 monthly mortgage. The bank sent a foreclosure notice. They were about to lose the house. And that's when I saw the look in my father's eyes change for the first time when he mentioned Grandpa. It wasn't the usual distant respect. It was something else. Something that made my stomach turn. It was calculation. One evening in March, my parents invited me over for an important family discussion. When I arrived, I found them sitting at the dining table with a laptop and a thick stack of printouts. "Sit down, honey." Mom pulled out a chair for me. "We need your input on something." Dad opened the laptop, displaying an Excel spreadsheet filled with numbers, mortgage payments, utilities, insurance, property tax, student loans. The final column glowed red, $4,200 a month. "We're about to lose the house," Dad said bluntly. "We've got 60 days. I already knew this, but seeing the official numbers still made my throat tighten. "We've come up with a solution," Mom interjected, her voice oddly cheerful. "We're going to move in with Dad." "With Grandpa Jeff?" I was surprised. "He agreed to this?" "I already talked to him," Dad nodded. "He's actually thrilled. He said he's been lonely in that huge penthouse. Having people around would be nice. Plus, we can take care of him. He's 75 after all." It sounded reasonable, but something in Dad's tone made me uneasy, too rehearsed. "That's a good idea," I said cautiously. "But does he have enough space? I mean, he's been living alone for so long." "The penthouse has 3 bedrooms, Emma," Mom cut in. "Plenty of room for all of us. And more importantly, we'll save a ton of money. No mortgage, no property tax, we'll just chip in for utilities." Dad added, "And if we take good care of him, who knows? Maybe he'll leave us something in his will someday." I went cold. That was the first time I'd ever heard Dad talk about Grandpa's inheritance. Before this, he'd never mentioned anything about money or property. "Dad, he's still healthy." I tried to keep my voice steady. And it's his property. He has the right to do whatever he wants with it. Of course, Dad quickly agreed. I'm just saying, if we take good care of him, that's the right thing to do. He'll appreciate it. I went home that night with a heavy sense of unease settling in my chest. A month later, my parents moved into the penthouse. Grandpa called me, sounding cheerful. Emma, come visit. The place is bustling now, much livelier. I stopped by that weekend. Mom greeted me at the door with a bright smile I hadn't seen in ages. Come in, I'm making chocolate chip cookies, your grandmother's recipe. But the moment I stepped inside, I noticed something was different. The hallway wall, previously painted in the soft beige Grandpa loved, was now a dark gray. The vintage painting of Dublin, his homeland, had vanished, replaced by a modern abstract piece. Isn't it beautiful? Mom noticed my gaze. I found it at a gallery in Brooklyn. This place needed some modernization. But did Grandpa agree to this? He said, whatever makes you happy, Mom waved dismissively. He's old, doesn't care about aesthetics anymore. I walked into the living room. The classic brown leather sofa Grandpa bought in 1995, he'd once told me it was the first piece of furniture he purchased when he bought this penthouse, had been replaced with a white Scandinavian-style set. The oak bookshelf filled with history books and biographies had been shoved into a corner, making way for a glass display case with fashion magazines. Where's Grandpa? I asked. In his study, Mom replied. He spends all day in there. I think he's trying to avoid us. She laughed, but there was bitterness in her voice. I headed to Grandpa's study, a small room facing Central Park where he spent hours reading and managing his investments. I knocked and heard his voice. Come in. He sat behind his antique mahogany desk, eyes fixed on the window. When he saw me, his face lit up. Emma, my favorite girl. I hugged him, noticing he'd lost some weight. Are you okay? I'm fine, just tired from all the changes. He glanced out the door, lowering his voice. I didn't expect them to change so much. I said they could make a few small adjustments to feel comfortable, but you can tell them you don't like it. I know, he sighed. But they're going through a rough time. I don't want to be the cruel father. Richard's my only son. And Linda, she's under a lot of stress too. I looked at him, seeing something in his eyes, not fear, but wariness. But I didn't press further. I thought maybe he just needed time to adjust. 2 weeks later, Grandpa called me at 11 p.m. Emma, can you come over? Are you okay? I worried. I'm fine, but I need to talk to you, privately. I arrived at the penthouse at 11:30 p.m. My parents were asleep. Grandpa opened the door in his pajamas, his expression grave. In his study, he pointed to his desk. I keep important documents in this drawer. He opened it. Copies of my will and trust documents. I always keep this drawer locked. Yes? Today, I discovered the lock had been picked. Someone opened this drawer. My heart skipped a beat. Are you sure? Absolutely sure. I have an old habit from my business days. I place a tiny thread at the corner of the drawer. The thread was moved, and the documents have fingerprints that aren't mine. Have you asked my parents? Not yet. I want to be certain first. But, Emma, he looked at me, pain in his eyes. I'm afraid my son is planning something. What do you think Dad's trying to do? I don't know. But I've noticed Richard asking about my estate planning multiple times. Questions about how I own the penthouse, whether anyone's name is on the title, how my will is structured. Very specific questions. I sat down, my head spinning. What do you want me to do? I'm not sure yet, but I need you to help me observe, visit more often, pay attention to what they're doing. Over the next 2 weeks, I visited more frequently, and I started noticing strange things. Once, I overheard Dad on the phone in his room whispering, Right, I need to know the process for transferring title. What if the owner is elderly, maybe senile? Does that require a court order? Another time, I caught Mom scanning documents in Grandpa's study when he'd gone grocery shopping. When I asked, she said, Your grandfather asked me to organize his documents. But when I asked Grandpa, he said, I didn't ask anyone. I always organize my own documents. The most frightening moment came one afternoon. I accidentally saw a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. Contact real estate attorney. Power of attorney, dementia clause, forged signature, risk level. Timeline, 3 months. I photographed it and sent it to Grandpa. That evening, he called me back. "Emma, I need you to do something. Don't tell your parents. I'm going away for a while." A week later, Grandpa made an announcement at dinner. "I'm going to visit my brother in Ireland. Patrick's been inviting me for years. I think it's time. I need a break after these stressful months dealing with old age ailments." My parents exchanged a quick glance. Too quick, but I caught it. "How long will you be gone?" Dad asked, trying to sound casual. "Maybe 2, 3 months. I want to tour Europe, Scotland, France, Italy. I'm getting old. Need to enjoy life while I still can." "Do you need someone to go with you?" Mom asked. "You're 75, traveling alone." "I'll be fine. Patrick will meet me in Dublin. And I have my phone. I can stay in touch any time." After dinner, while washing dishes, I heard my parents talking in their bedroom. I quietly approached the door. "This is our chance," Mom's voice almost excited. 3 months. Enough time." "Are you sure about this?" Dad sounded hesitant. "If we get caught..." "What are you afraid of? He's on the other side of the world. And he's 75? We can claim he has dementia, lacks capacity to make decisions. We already have the fake psychiatric evaluation." "Fake psychiatric evaluation?" Dad's voice rose. "Where did you get that?" "Don't ask. What matters is we have it. And the real estate attorney confirmed. If we have medical evidence showing the owner has cognitive decline, and we're immediate family providing care, we can file for conservatorship and transfer the title." My blood froze. I backed away, trembling, pulled out my phone and texted Grandpa. "You need to leave now. I just heard them talking. They want to file for conservatorship." He replied, "I know, sweetheart. That's exactly why I have to leave. I'll call you later." 2 days later, Grandpa went to the airport. Dad drove him. When he returned, Dad smiled with relief. "He's on the plane. We've got 3 months." But what Dad didn't know was, Grandpa never boarded that plane. He'd rented a studio apartment just 10 blocks from the penthouse, and he was sitting there with a private investigator named Marcus Webb, a former NYPD detective. Grandpa called me from the studio. "Emma, I'm going to monitor them from here. Marcus will help me gather evidence. I need you to keep visiting. Act like you don't know anything. Can you do that?" "Yes," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I'll help you." For the next 3 months, I became an actress. I visited my parents every week, asked about their lives, cooked with them, pretended everything was normal. But simultaneously, I recorded every conversation. In New York, this is legal because it's a one-party consent state. Only one party needs to consent to recording. I photographed every document I found. I documented every detail. Meanwhile, Grandpa and Marcus worked tirelessly. Marcus surveilled my parents. He documented everywhere they went, everyone they met. Dad met with a real estate attorney named David Klein at a Midtown office. Marcus contacted Klein's receptionist, paid $500 to view the appointment log. Dad had scheduled 3 appointments titled Emergency Property Transfer, Elderly Parent. Mom met with a man at an East Village coffee shop 3 times. Marcus followed this man. Turned out he was a document specialist, a polite term for someone who forges documents. Marcus contacted him, posed as a client, and recorded a conversation where he admitted he'd helped Mrs. Cooper with some documents. My parents visited a notary public twice. Marcus went to see this notary, a woman named Cheryl Kim, and told her straight up that police might investigate. Mrs. Kim, frightened, confessed that my parents had asked her to notarize a deed transfer, but they'd forged Grandpa's signature themselves. She said she'd been suspicious, but they paid her $2,000 cash to not ask questions. Marcus convinced Mrs. Kim to agree to testify later. Marcus also contacted my parents' former colleagues. One person, Janet Reeves, Mom's former co-worker, told Marcus that Mom had once discussed ways to claim inheritance early if a parent had dementia. Janet didn't think it was serious at the time, but now she was willing to testify. Most importantly, Marcus installed hidden security cameras throughout the penthouse. He didn't tell my parents. The cameras were small, concealed, everywhere. And they recorded everything. Over 3 months, the cameras captured video of Dad and Mom discussing in detail their plan to transfer title using forged documents. Video of Mom meeting with the document specialist in Grandpa's own living room, practicing his signature. Video of Dad on the phone with the attorney, asking how to prove a parent is incompetent without an actual medical exam. Everything was recorded. Everything was ready. Then, in the 3rd month, my parents completed their plan. They filed a deed transfer at the county clerk's office with a forged signature from Grandpa claiming he'd gifted the penthouse to them due to declining health and gratitude for caregiving. They used fake notarized documents, a fake medical evaluation, and a letter of intent with a forged signature. The county clerk, having no reason to suspect anything, processed the transfer. Officially, on paper, the penthouse now belonged to my parents. That's when they sent an email to Grandpa, who was still supposedly in Ireland, announcing, "Dad, we have good news. We've arranged to transfer the penthouse into our names, since you don't really need it anymore. You can relax and enjoy retirement in Ireland. We'll handle everything here." The email didn't ask permission. It just informed. Grandpa called me immediately after reading it. "Emma, it's time. I'm coming home." The day Grandpa returned from Ireland was a Saturday in early June. Beautiful sunny weather, a perfect New York day. My parents had prepared meticulously. They'd changed all the locks on the penthouse. They'd contacted a moving company to be ready to pack Grandpa's belongings. They'd even drafted an agreement for him to sign, a document acknowledging the transfer and waiving all future claims. They'd invited me to welcome Grandpa home. I showed up with a churning stomach and a phone in my pocket secretly recording. At 10 a.m., my parents received a text from Grandpa. "Taxi's arriving. I'll be there in 15 minutes. My parents exchanged a look. Mom smiled coldly. "Showtime." They went to stand outside the penthouse door. Dad held the stack of legal documents. Mom held the keys. They stood there like new owners waiting to evict the previous tenant. At 11:10 a.m., the elevator doors opened. Grandpa stepped out. His hair looked shorter, his posture straighter, and his eyes sharper than I'd ever seen. Behind him, 3 men emerged. They wore suits. One was Marcus Webb. I didn't recognize the other 2. Grandpa approached the entrance of the penthouse, his own home, and looked at my parents. "Richard, Linda," he said, his voice calm to the point of being frightening. "May I enter my own home?" Dad stepped forward, shoulders squared. "This isn't your home anymore, Dad. This penthouse now belongs to Linda and me. Look at these documents." He held out a stack of papers. "The deed transfer has been filed and recorded at the county clerk. Legal and proper. You signed this transfer before you left for Ireland." "I signed it?" Grandpa asked, voice still calm. "Yes, you did. That's your signature." Mom pointed to the signature line on the document. Grandpa looked at the document for a long moment. Then he smiled, a cold, sad smile. "Whoa. So you think you've succeeded?" "We have succeeded," Dad said flatly. "You can hire a lawyer to challenge it, but these documents are legal. Notarized, recorded. You'll spend years and hundreds of thousands in attorney fees just to lose." "And you're 75 now," Mom added, her voice faux compassionate. "You should rest. In a place appropriate for your age. We'll help you find a nice assisted living facility." I stood behind them, feeling nauseous. I couldn't believe these were my parents, the people who raised me, taught me about honesty and integrity. Grandpa looked at me briefly, then turned back to my parents. "You know," he said slowly, "I taught Richard many things growing up. I taught you about hard work, about integrity, about earning what you have. But there's one lesson I regret not teaching you." "What's that?" Dad asked defensively. "I didn't teach you that if you're going to play dirty, you'd better make sure your opponent isn't playing dirtier." Grandpa nodded gently toward Marcus. Marcus stepped forward, opened a briefcase, and pulled out a stack of documents far thicker than my parents. Mr. Richard Cooper and Mrs. Linda Cooper, Marcus said, his voice professional and cold. I'm Marcus Webb, a private investigator hired by Mr. Jeff Cooper. I'm presenting the following evidence of fraud, forgery, and attempted elder abuse. My parents' faces went pale. Marcus began listing. Evidence 1. Video surveillance from inside this penthouse, recorded over the past 3 months. He held up a USB drive. These videos show both of you discussing plans to forge Mr. Cooper's signature, contacting someone to create fake documents, and practicing forging his signature. Evidence 2. Testimony from Mrs. Cheryl Kim, notary public, admitting she accepted a $2,000 bribe to notarize documents with a forged signature. Evidence 3. Testimony from Mr. Tony Diaz, document specialist, admitting he created a fake medical evaluation and fake letter of intent for both of you for $5,000. Evidence 4. Bank records showing you withdrew $7,000 cash in 3 separate transactions, matching the amounts paid to the notary and document specialist. Evidence 5. Recorded conversations between Richard Cooper and real estate attorney David Klein, discussing how to transfer an elderly parent's property without consent. Evidence 6. Testimony from Janet Reeves, Mrs. Cooper's former colleague, who will testify that Mrs. Cooper discussed ways to claim inheritance early if a parent has dementia. With each item Marcus listed, my parents grew paler. Mom started trembling. Dad became rigid, jaw clenched. Both of you have violated multiple New York state laws, Marcus continued, including forgery in the 2nd degree, a Class D felony, criminal impersonation, a Class A misdemeanor, attempted grand larceny, property valued over $8 million, which constitutes grand larceny in the 1st degree, a Class B felony, and elder abuse under New York social services law. Right then, the elevator opened again. 2 uniformed police officers stepped out, followed by a woman in a suit. NYPD, one officer said. Mr. Cooper has filed a criminal complaint. We have a warrant to arrest Mr. Richard Cooper and Mrs. Linda Cooper. Dad, for the first time, looked panicked. Wait, this is a misunderstanding. Dad, I'm your son. You can't... You are my son, Grandpa said, his voice breaking for the first time. That's why this hurts so much. I gave you everything. I taught you everything. And you repaid me by trying to steal everything I built, then throw me into a nursing home like garbage. Dad, you don't understand, Mom started crying. We were desperate. We lost our house. We had no options. You had options, Grandpa said firmly. You could have asked for help, properly, honestly. I would have helped. I always help family. But you chose to steal. You chose to forge documents. You chose to discard me like I was worthless. The officer stepped up. Mr. and Mrs. Cooper, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. Miranda rights were read. Handcuffs came out, and in the hallway of a luxury Manhattan building, on a beautiful Saturday morning, my parents were arrested. Neighbors emerged from their apartments watching. The doorman stared, speechless. Everyone was witnessing this. As Dad was being led away by police, he turned to look at me for the first time. His eyes were full of accusation. You knew about this, didn't you, Emma? You helped him. I swallowed, tears streaming down my face. Yes. What kind of daughter are you? Dad shouted. You betrayed your own parents. No, I said, my voice shaking but firm. I protected my grandfather, the person I truly love. You and Mom, you're the ones who betrayed everyone. Betrayed him, betrayed the principles you taught me. Dad said nothing more. They were led into the elevator. The doors closed. Silence. Grandpa stood there staring at the closed doors, his shoulders sagging. I went to him, placed my hand on his shoulder. Are you okay? He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, very quietly, no, but I will be. Behind us, one of the suited men, a locksmith, began changing the locks back. The penthouse was being reclaimed. The first time my parents contacted me after the trial was 3 weeks later. A Thursday evening, my phone buzzed. Caller ID showed Mom. I stared at the screen vibrating in my hand, heart pounding. 5 rings, 10 rings. Finally, I hit reject. 2 minutes later, a voicemail. "Emma, honey, it's Mom. I know you don't want to talk to us, but you have to understand. We had no choice. We were desperate. I can't sleep, sweetheart. Every night I think about what happened. Can you call me back? Please?" Mom's voice trembled, breaking. I could hear her crying, and part of me, the daughter who'd lived with her for 28 years, wanted to call back, wanted to hear her explanation, wanted to believe there was some acceptable reason. But I didn't call. I deleted the voicemail and blocked the number. The second attempt came via email. A long email from Dad, sent at 2 a.m. "Emma, I know you're angry at us. I understand, but I need you to know the truth. We're not the villains everyone thinks we are. We're just ordinary people pushed into a desperate situation. Do you know what it feels like to lose everything? To watch your bank account hit zero? To see the foreclosure notice? To know you're about to be homeless?" Your mother cried every night. I couldn't sleep, thinking about how I'd failed our family. I'm 52, Emma. Who's going to hire a 52-year-old accountant in this market? And your grandfather, Jeff, he has $8 million in assets. He lives alone in that penthouse, doesn't need it, while his own family, his son and granddaughter, are struggling. Is that fair? I'm not saying what I did was right. I know I was wrong. But I want you to understand, I didn't do it out of greed. I did it for survival, for family, for you. Jeff has plenty of money. He'll be fine. But us? We've lost everything. We're living in a small Bronx apartment now, barely making rent. Your mother works 2 jobs. I'm delivering food for DoorDash. At 52, can you forgive us? Not because we deserve it, but because we're your family. Your blood. The people who raised you, fed you, loved you for 28 years. Please, Emma, don't abandon us. Dad. I read the email 3 times. Each time I felt a mixture of emotions: heartache, anger, guilt, and a compassion I didn't want to admit. I forwarded the email to Grandpa. What do you think I should do? I think you should do what feels right for you. If you want to respond to the email, respond. If you want to meet with them, meet them. But protect yourself. Set boundaries. And never feel guilty about them facing the consequences of choices they made. That night, I replied to Dad's email. Dad, I read your email. I understand you're struggling. But I can't pretend what you did is okay just because you were desperate. You wrote that you did it for family. But family doesn't betray each other. Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't plan to throw a 75-year-old man out of his own home. Grandpa offered to help you. Multiple times. But you didn't want help. You wanted to take everything. I need time. I don't know if I can forgive you, but right now, I can't have you in my life. Emma. 6 months after the trial, Mom showed up at the elementary school where I teach. I was leaving my classroom at 4 p.m. when I saw her standing in the hallway. She'd lost a lot of weight. Her hair had grayed significantly. Her clothes, an old sweater and faded jeans, looked worn out. But the most striking thing was her eyes, exhausted, pained, and maybe regretful. Emma, she said, her voice trembling, can you give me 5 minutes? I looked around. A few colleagues were observing. I didn't want a scene here. 10 minutes, I said. Cafeteria. We sat in a far corner of the empty school cafeteria. Mom sat across from me, hands clasped on the table, unable to look at me. I'm sorry, she began. I know sorry isn't enough, but I need you to know, I regret everything, every decision, every action. If I could go back and undo it, I would. I need time, I finally said. Maybe someday I can forgive, but not today. Not soon. Mom nodded, wiping tears. I understand. I'll wait, however long it takes. She stood to leave, then turned back. Is Jeff okay? I was surprised by the question. He's fine. Can you tell him I'm sorry? I know he doesn't want to hear from me directly, but I need him to know. That evening, when I told Grandpa about the meeting, he was silent for a long time. Linda apologized? He finally said. Yes. Do you think she's genuine? I think so, but I'm not sure if it changes anything. Grandpa nodded, looking out the window. Forgiveness is a process, Emma. I'm not ready. Maybe I'll never be ready, and that's okay. I don't owe them forgiveness just because they apologized. So, what will you do? I'll continue living my life, with people who truly care about me, like you, and I'll let Richard and Linda face the consequences of their choices, not with hatred, but with boundaries. And that, I thought, was true wisdom, knowing when to forgive and when to simply move on. 2 months after the trial, Grandpa moved back into the penthouse. He hired a team to restore everything, repainted the walls beige, bought back an identical brown leather sofa, rehung the Dublin painting. The place now looked exactly like it did 3 years ago, as if nothing had happened. But Grandpa had changed. I could see it. He smiled less. He had moments where he'd stare out the window, lost in thought. And I knew he was thinking about Richard, his son. We sat in silence, sunset light streaming through the windows, creating a golden glow in the room. Emma, he finally said, I've updated my will. You don't need to tell me about that. I want you to know. When I'm gone, this penthouse and the majority of my estate will go to you. I'm leaving a small trust fund for Richard, enough so he won't be desperate, but not enough to waste. I think that's the best way. Tears filled my eyes. Grandpa, you stood by me when everyone else failed me. You're my real family, and I want to make sure you're taken care of. I hugged him, feeling his small frame in my arms. He's 75 years old, but to me, he's still the strongest man I know. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for being worthy of that trust. We sat there for a long while, in silence, in a peace we'd fought hard to achieve. Now, years later, I still visit Grandpa every week. We cook together, watch movies, talk about life. He's still sharp as a tack, still manages his investments, still reads 3 newspapers every day. My parents? They've tried to contact me a few times, apologizing, explaining, justifying. But I'm not ready yet. Maybe someday. Maybe never. I'm still processing the fact that the people I trusted most were capable of something like that. But I've learned an important lesson. Family isn't just about blood. Family is about loyalty, respect, standing by each other in hard times, not exploiting each other's pain. My grandfather, Jeff Cooper, taught me that, not through words, but through actions. By standing up to protect himself, he taught me that forgiveness matters, but boundaries matter more. And sometimes, the people who love us most aren't those who share our DNA, but those who stand by us when everything falls apart. Real family isn't defined by the blood you share. It's defined by the moments you share and the respect you give. If you were in my situation, what would you do? Would you help your grandfather expose your parents, or would you let them succeed? Comment below and let me know your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about family, betrayal, and justice. Because sometimes real life is more dramatic than any movie.